What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and the NFL trade deadline has come and went. The New York Giants finished the deadline by making only one trade. We thought they might make another. Maybe they would also trade away Adoree Jackson, but in the end, they just made the Leonard Williams trade and hauled in the second-round pick in this upcoming draft and an additional fifth-round pick in the 2025 NFL draft. So the Giants, would we have liked to see them make more moves? Totally. I really would have liked to see the Adoree Jackson trade happen. Apparently, they tried to make it happen, but they didn't get the offer that they were looking for. They did have some offers on the table, it sounds like, for Saquon Barkley, but they stood firm on their original stance. They were not trading Saquon Barkley. I read a report that Joe Schoen was waiting to be blown away before even considering it, and he was never blown away by any of the offers that they did receive for Saquon Barkley. So, in the end, the New York Giants make one trade, fetch a second-round pick in return for Leonard Williams, and here we are. Now we got to look at this future of this team, the state of this team, and say, what's next for the New York Giants, right? Because it's a 2-6 season. The Giants don't look good. They don't look like they're going to be good anytime soon this year. So is it time to start turning all attention towards draft season, or can they still turn things around? Well, even if they can turn things around, it is important to look ahead to the draft season because now, especially with this additional second-round pick here, the Giants are set up for a pretty bright future if all things go according to Joe Schoen's plan. So we're going to take a look at the Giants draft capital and kind of preview some of the plans that they might have in store for this upcoming off season and the draft season in particular. But before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topic down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And what is your reaction to the NFL trade deadline?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Look, the Giants probably could have traded more players. I mean, Adoree Jackson certainly stands out, but the truth is that they didn't get his contract restructured by 4 p.m. yesterday, so they were really kind of strapped. They would have had to take on the rest of his contract if they moved him. There was, kind of word that maybe they would trade him to the Buffalo Bills for their former first-round pick, Khair Elam. Obviously, that did not happen. I would have liked that. I think that would have been a good move for us. But end of the day, we stick to our guns and we, move Leonard Williams and we get a second-round pick next year and a fifth-round pick. So I want to go over the draft capital that we do have for 2024. I imagine a lot of you are wondering what we have. And, this plays into multiple different avenues of strategy here. I'm not going to say like I prefer one over the other, but the Giants can say to themselves, if we want to go in the direction of a quarterback, we now have more ammo to move up. If that's something they want to do, they can now do it. I know people are rushing to the comments to say, we always take shots at Daniel Jones. It's not me. This is probably what they're thinking too. If things don't go so well this year and they want to hit the reset button, it's certainly up in the air. It's certainly something that they can decide. And we've seen Joe Schoen be pretty aggressive in some instances. And look, the Giants have an out after next year. They can have the rookie quarterback play alongside him, learn, open competition, and then move on from Daniel Jones like he was never even here. And that's really the truth of what this situation kind of may unfold. The consequence of being a bad team ultimately, and having a quarterback who's stuck in this situation. And look, I feel bad for Daniel Jones because he was put in a spot to lose. He's never been put in a spot where he could really be his best self. Bad offensive line play, bad weapons, Saquon's injuries, bad coaching, turnover in the offensive coaching room. Just so many variables impacted Daniel Jones. It's hard to sit here and say he had a fair shot because the truth is he never did, and he still doesn't, and he probably won't until he goes to another team. And I think that he could go to another team that actually picks him up and maybe gives him a decent offensive line, gives him some weapons, and he could have success. He's 26 years old. I believe he's young. He still could be a very good player in this league. I just don't think it's going to be with the Giants because we have so much to figure out, my friends. We need a couple more years before we're really like a solidified team that can compete with the best of the best. That's the unfortunate truth and reality. So draft capital, it helps aid that exactly. You want to go in the direction of a quarterback? You can. If you want to stick with Daniel Jones and go after a top offensive tackle to replace Evan Neal on the right side, you can. If you want to go and trade up a spot to get Marvin Harrison Jr. and see if Daniel Jones can leverage a top wide receiver, you can do that. This is what an extra second round pick does for you. So Anthony, before I hand it over to you to give your kind of take on that aspect of things, here's the Giants' 2024 draft picks currently. It's going to change. Keep in mind because of the records or whatever it might be. If we beat the Raiders, suddenly things get a little bit less favorable in terms of where we're picking. But right now we have the number 4 overall selection, right? So we're kind of in the realm of Drake May. Potentially, you're probably going to have to move up to get him. If not, you're definitely in the realm of top offensive tackle available or Marvin Harrison Jr. So you're there. You're in that section. Then you have 2 second-round picks. Currently, you have the Giants, which is number 35, which you can get a pretty good player. I'm pretty sure that's relatively where they got Xavier McKinney. And then you have number 61, which is Seattle's current pick. So that could go back, that could come up. It depends where they finish in the standings, but number 61 is very solid. You can use that for a myriad of things, whether it be moving up in the second round, maybe if you want to package those two together and move back up into the first round to get that extra 5th-year option on a player with a first-round draft grade the Giants don't want to miss out on. That's an opportunity. They have in the third round number 69, so they have 61 and 69 really close together there currently, which is definitely something to consider. They have 104 in the 4th round, 139 in the 5th round, and 182 in the 6th round. They don't have a 7th round pick because they traded it for Isaiah Simmons. So Anthony, when you're looking at those picks right there, 4, 35, 61. Let's say the draft ended today or the season ended today. That's pretty good value there. I still think that we're going to end up with a top 5 pick. And I think that 61st pick from Seattle could end up in the 50 range. So, it really depends on how well they perform. The offensive line is struggling. All it takes is one injury, and I don't hope that for them. I hope they have a good season because I have nothing against the Seahawks. They have a couple of our former players in Julian Love and Leonard Williams. Hope the best for them. But, if they end up in the 50s, the Giants have really good capital there. How do you think you can utilize that new value to boost their prospects of improving this roster?
There's a lot of draft capital here for the New York Giants. You're talking about having 4 top 100 picks in this upcoming draft, and that's a big deal for any team, especially for a New York Giants team that's trying to get younger and trying to find pieces to build around for the future. So like you said, same thing for me. I'm not saying what the New York Giants should do or what they will do, but I'm just going to discuss some of the options that they could take when we get over to draft season or even just get into the offseason. Now, you mentioned that second round pick, having 2 second round picks plus a high first round pick, having that second round pick is the difference between settling for the quarterback that is available at 5 or trading up and getting the quarterback that you want at number 3, if that's the route the Giants want to take. Now, they might not want to take a quarterback, so maybe it's the difference between taking the offensive tackle that you settle with at 10 or moving up and getting the one that you really want at 5. It's the same story there. That extra second round pick gives the Giants a lot of leverage in trading up in the first round of the NFL draft to land the superstar prospect that they feel is the guy that they just have to walk away from draft day with in their possession. So that's a huge deal right there, having that extra second round pick. The other thing, that second round pick, like you mentioned, you can get really good players with second round picks. The Giants have gotten starters in the second round for the past several seasons, and most NFL teams get a lot of starting players in the second round of the draft. I mean, hell, if you want to take a look at Will Levis, that wasn't a first round pick, so even if the Giants don't want to take a first round quarterback, you never know who can be drafted in the first 3 rounds of the draft that goes on to be a solid starting quarterback if that's where they want to take one, get somebody to develop if they still believe that Daniel Jones has something left in the tank, which they might just think if he performs well for the rest of this regular season. But the other thing that you could do with that second round pick, so I mentioned you could trade up in the first round, you could take a second marquee prospect, a top 100 or maybe even top 50 player in the draft in the second round, get 2 of those guys, or you can trade that second round pick. The Giants traded a 33rd round pick, the 99th overall pick in the draft this past offseason, to get a former Pro Bowler and 1,000-yard receiver in tight end Darren Waller. Now imagine if that was a second round pick. They could have gotten someone even better, even more dynamic, and even more game-changing. And that doesn't just have to be a wide receiver. I'm not just talking about potentially trading a second-round pick to get a guy like a DJ Moore, I think, went for a second-round pick a couple years ago, or for a Jerry Jeudy. I know that was the asking price for him. Doesn't even have to be a wide receiver. It can be an offensive lineman of all things, right? I know that the Giants, didn't they trade Kevin Zeitler, I think, for third round pick years ago? I think that's the compensation that they got there. So think if the Giants traded a second round pick for an offensive lineman, they could get a pretty damn good player there. Or maybe how about a pass rusher? Look at what the Chicago Bears just did at this trade deadline. They traded to get Montez Sweat for a second round pick. Now that's not necessarily a good trade in my opinion for the Chicago Bears, and not necessarily a trade I could see the New York Giants making. But you get into the offseason, maybe there's a really talented player on the trading block who's an established pass rusher, 10 plus sacks per season guy. then you might want to consider throwing that second round pick out there if they're young enough and worth building around for the future. So there's a lot of options that second round pick gives you. You can take a player with it. You could trade up in the draft with it. You could trade down in the draft with it for what it's worth and get additional third round picks and fourth round picks and acquire more depth for your team. Or you can trade it and get a star player somewhere else in the NFL that's already established. So this gives the Giants endless resources here. Gives them a ton of flexibility going into this offseason. And it's something that really does indicate that Joe Schoen isn't just winning to build now. That's a big deal here because the Giants, we thought after last season, going to the playoffs and winning that playoff game, maybe this team would take the win now approach. It looked like they were about to. They paid Daniel Jones, they franchise tagged Saquon Barkley, they traded for Darren Waller. Everything looked like win now, but maybe there was a chance it was win now while rebuilding for later. And I think that's what it really is rebuilding for later as well, because now getting this additional second round pick for Leonard Williams. Leonard Williams is a player that helps you win now. A second round pick is something that helps you win then. And the Giants are looking to build toward the future here. So I think that this is something that from Joe Schoen signifies that the Giants are not stuck in this mode of trying to win as many football games as they can this season. Of course, they're going to do that, but they'd also like to set themselves up for sustained success throughout the future of this franchise. And that's something really important that I don't think, this is a move I think we haven't seen the Giants make in a very long time. A move that sets themselves up to have a very bright future instead of having a very bright present. So it's a move that I really like. I can't sing the praises enough for Joe Schoen on this trade in particular. I love Leonard Williams. I think he was a great player for us, but was he a game-changing elite all-pro player? No, he wasn't. And the Giants kind of got a haul for him like as if he was. So you can't really complain about that. Getting a second-round pick for a solid run-defending, he's a good pass rusher too, but for a solid interior defensive lineman, that's a damn good deal from Joe Schoen. So I really like that one, but as I just mentioned, there's so many options there. The top four being you can trade up in the draft, you can pick 2 second-round prospects, you could trade it for a player in the NFL, or you can even trade down with it. There's endless possibilities now open to the New York Giants with this additional second-round pick, and it'll be interesting to see which route exactly they decide to take. But like I said, I mentioned second-round pick went to Montez Sweat. Something else that I do want to get your take on, Alex, it's not necessarily New York Giants related, but in a roundabout way it is, right? Because we just saw Chase Young and Montez Sweat both get traded away from the Washington Commanders. So not only are the Giants making moves at the deadline to set themselves up for the future, so is a division rival in Washington doing the exact same thing, trading 2 really talented young pass rushers for future draft picks. A third-round pick for Chase Young, a second-round pick for Montez Sweat. Washington's making some interesting moves here, and keep in mind, the Giants do play Washington again, I think in, 2-3 weeks here? So we're coming up on another Washington matchup. This is an even worse Washington team. We beat Washington just a week ago, or 2 weeks ago now at this point. So I think that's also an interesting thing to take note of, that the Giants, they're 2-6 right now. The season looks lost, but in a few weeks from now, if they pick up this win against Las Vegas, they pick up that win against a lesser Washington team that they've already beaten, the Giants could actually start to stack some wins on their season here. But what are your thoughts on Washington making these deals? Now, the Giants aren't just the one team in the NFC East that's making these moves, trading these players away for future draft picks. Also, Washington is doing the same thing. How are you feeling about that, kind of seeing the NFC East, half of the NFC East now rather, make some moves to build towards the future here?
I mean, Washington is actively tanking. Trading away arguably your two best edge rushers, definitely your two best edge rushers. You have Deron Payne, and the other guy, I forgot his name at the moment. But the truth is that right now, if you're the Giants, you're looking at other teams saying to yourself, they're actively thinking about the future. The best case scenario for the Giants is they probably end up with a high pick, but obviously we're never going to root for this team to lose. I'd rather see this team win, and I'd rather, actually build some momentum and for what it's worth, want to watch football on Sundays. Like I hate Sundays now. Every Sunday, I know I'm going to be freaking depressed. And that's kind of how the life of a Giants fan at this point in time. It's really difficult. But at the end of the day, other teams, Washington, cashing in. You can't even look at what Minnesota, man. Like Minnesota traded away Ezra Cleveland, and they traded for Joshua Dobbs. Like Kirk Cousins went down, and they traded one of their best offensive linemen on a team that's had a really bad offensive line for years. Like I don't know why they wouldn't want to pay Ezra Cleveland, but I don't know. Maybe he'll hit free agency and they'll try to get him back. I don't know, man. Like there's teams that are obviously thinking about the future. Washington is certainly one of them. But meanwhile, by the way, they almost beat the Eagles last week. They put up like 31 points. They were winning that game for like a good 2-3 quarters. Which is surprising because the Giants beating them honestly feels like we just caught them on a bad day. Like, I think Washington's a lot better than people give them credit for, especially on offense. I think they actually have a decent offense when they're playing and firing on all cylinders. We had a really good game plan against Sam Howell, but, looking at their defense now, trading away 2 of their edge rushers heading to free agency, they were looking for draft capital, but the fact that they only got a 3rd-round pick for Chase Young and we got a 2nd and a 5th for Leonard Williams is mind-blowing. Like, highway robbery mind-blowing by Joe Schoen. Which is why, like, I do not want to give up on Joe Schoen. You know what I mean? I think he's a good general manager. I mean, he makes deals like this, and we're like, this is insane. Like, how did he pull this off? This team has not played well. And for what it's worth, Anthony, I think that's more on coaching than it is on Joe Schoen. People will complain about the offensive line, but he allocated a top 10 pick toward the right tackle position in Evan Neal. He allocated another second-round pick, and John Michael Schmitz. I mean, what more could you ask? He invested 2 high-quality picks on 2 starting offensive linemen, and they didn't pan out so far. Rather, JMS is young. I think he's going to be fine, and he's a good player. But Evan Neal's the one that really hasn't panned out. And then, what, are you going to blame Joe Schoen for Andrew Thomas getting injured? He just extended him and made sure that we have a left tackle for the next 7 years. I mean, I give him credit for that. Bobby Okereke looks like a stud. Micah McFadden looks really good. Deontay Banks looks like a stud. Cordell Flott looks really solid. Jason Pinnock is a starter after a practice squad cut by the Jets. You know what I mean? Like, Kayvon Thibodeau looked really freaking good last week. He extended Dexter Lawrence. I think that he's actually done some decent GMing here. The only thing that has killed us has been injuries, and unfortunately, that has been the freaking exact same narrative every single season. Injuries have derailed us. What are you going to do about that? It's tough. It's tough. I mean, he went in without any money, got Justin Pugh, who's been serviceable. Ben Bredesen, he's obviously, I think he was brought in during Dave Gettleman's era, but he's been solid for us. Glowinski's been really decent, actually, the last couple weeks. So, right now, I'm just kind of asking myself, who's at fault here? I think bad luck for the injuries certainly hasn't helped, but I actually don't think Joe Schoen has done a bad job. He's allocated the resources toward the positions that we needed help in. The players just haven't really panned out. And who's to blame for that? I'd say coaching, injuries, coaching, maybe the player themselves. Those 3 variables are kind of the ones I'd be kind of pointing fingers at right now. But I certainly don't think Joe Schoen has done a bad job. And for what it's worth, I think that some of our draft picks, Bellinger has been solid, have been good. Like, Trey Hawkins looks like he has a future here as a 6th round pick. The deal for Isaiah Simmons was good. I mean, like, Micah McFadden has been excellent. I don't know, man. Like, what are your thoughts on Joe Schoen? Because, like, right now, like, I really don't think he's done that bad of a job. Maybe others disagree. But I think he's been fine. I think that I'm committed to giving him at least a couple more years to figure this thing out. And I just hope that the coaching gets a little bit better because Brian Daboll has been a bit inconsistent this year.
Brian Daboll's not having a good year. I still have faith in Brian Daboll, and I still think he should be the head coach through this season and next season. I think that he's done enough to earn a longer leash than the guys like Joe Judge, like Pat Shurmur, and like Ben McAdoo. And also, I don't think that the New York Giants, I don't think it's a good idea to just keep turning out head coaches every 2 years. Listen, sometimes it does take a while. It takes years, like 3 years, 5 years even, sometimes for a head coach to instill what they're trying to instill in a team, to build the roster the way they want to build it. But I think that exact thing is even more true to say for general managers. General managers getting fired after 2 seasons is a rarity. That almost never happens. Should it have happened with Dave Gettleman? You could argue, yes, it should have, but even then, the Giants wouldn't have an Andrew Thomas. They wouldn't have a Dexter Lawrence, right? He still did end up hitting on some of those draft picks, and those weren't necessarily moves that he made in his first 2 seasons as GM. The Andrew Thomas pick is certainly not one that he made in his first 2 seasons as GM. So, longer leashes are always extended to general managers, shorter leashes, sure, to head coaches, but I think in this instance, this particular case for the New York Giants, Brian Daboll deserves more than 2 seasons. Joe Schoen absolutely deserves more than 2 seasons because he's made it pretty much abundantly clear that he's not trying to step in, build this roster for this season and win right now. He's made it clear that he's making moves to win for the future. He's building something. He's not building something overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day, right? You have to take your time here and let this general manager see out his vision, and it's going to take a while, right? He's not going to have these draft picks step in and instantly be rookie of the year candidates every year. I mean, listen, if you were going based off of just the last year's rookie draft class, Evan Neal looked like crap and Kayvon Thibodeau was all right. He looked good. Are you going to fire Joe Schoen for that? No. You have to wait because now look at Kayvon Thibodeau in year 2. Looks like a freaking star. Evan Neal still doesn't look like a star, but at least Kayvon Thibodeau does. But that's my point, though. You just have to wait and see sometimes with these draft prospects. You really don't know who they are and what they're going to be in the NFL, probably until year 3 in most cases. So to judge Joe Schoen based on the team's win and loss record, when the majority of the moves that he's made are actually panning out here, I would say Darren Waller is the best player that the Giants have had on offense this season, outside of the injury setbacks that he's had. He's been by far their most efficient receiving weapon. Kayvon Thibodeau is a Joe Schoen draft pick. He's been one of their best defenders. He locked up Dexter Lawrence for the long run. He's made moves on the offensive line that you just mentioned, Alex. Joe Schoen is making moves here to help the New York Giants win games, but like you said, coaching has been the problem. Player performance and execution has been the problem all season long. So I think that my criticism mostly lies with the coaching staff. Do I think that Joe Schoen's been perfect? No, but no GM in the world is perfect. I know everybody always tries to hail Howie Roseman of the Philadelphia Eagles as a second coming. He's made bad moves too. It's just the good outweighs the bad. And so far for me, the good does outweigh the bad for the New York Giants under Joe Schoen. I like what he's doing and I like what he's building, and it would be a damn shame if the Giants pulled the trigger, jumped the gun too quickly, and moved on from this vision that Joe Schoen is building far too soon. So Joe Schoen is definitely safe at the end of this year, in my opinion. I think he's probably safe for the next 2 years as well. I think he'll probably play out this contract as general manager for the New York Giants because he is building this team for the future. He's doing things the right way. He is constructing this roster. You know, like I just mentioned, Howie Roseman, everybody loves to talk about him. You can see similarities in the way that Roseman constructed the Philadelphia Eagles roster to the way that Joe Schoen is constructing the New York Giants roster right now. It's not going to result in overnight wins. The only way you get overnight wins is if you have some superstar, if you end up drafting some superstar quarterback like a Patrick Mahomes who steps in year 2 and is instantly the MVP of the NFL. That never happens. It happens here and there, but it really never happens. So for Joe Schoen and for most general managers, it's a wait and see approach. It takes years to build and seek out their vision. And right now, Joe Schoen, in my opinion, is building the right way. And I would be really, really heartbroken to see the Giants tear down what he's building and jump the gun too soon. So you're asking me, where do I place my blame? I place it on the coaching staff. One thing that I will say about that, though, Alex, the Giants are very unlikely to move on from Brian Daboll at the end of this year because of Joe Schoen. Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll are best friends. Joe Schoen hired Brian Daboll. They both worked together in Buffalo. You think that after one bad year, Joe Schoen is going to make the decision to fire Brian Daboll? I don't think that management is just that ownership is just going to jump over management and fire Brian Daboll and say, Joe Schoen, you have no say in this matter. Of course, Joe Schoen has a say in this matter. He's the general manager. Joe Schoen is Brian Daboll's boss, and I think Giants fans lose sight of that sometimes. So as long as Joe Schoen is here, Brian Daboll at least has some heirloom of protection hanging over his head. So I don't think that ownership is going to jump the gun this offseason. I think that both Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll are both safe. Joe Schoen is definitely safe because I think his resume speaks for itself. He's done great things as general manager of the Giants. And Brian Daboll was head coach of the year last year. He doesn't look like that look like that right now. It's been a real struggle of a season. But Joe Schoen does protect Brian Daboll in some ways. And I think that you give them another year to really build out this vision that they've been trying to construct for the last year and a half. And I think that's what ownership is going to do. And that's what I would like to see happen because I do believe, and I have bought in to what Joe Schoen is trying to build here for the New York Giants. Am I a little bit out on Brian Daboll? Not necessarily. I still believe in him. I'd like to see him improve and get his shit together before the end of the season so I could feel confident in him going into next year. But Brian Dable and Joe Shane, I think, are definitely here to stay. And just to wrap up my point here, I think that Joe Shane is building this roster properly. Like, I think he's constructing it the right way. You know, he's gotten criticism and he's gotten praise for his handling of the Saquon Barkley situation. I praise him. He didn't lock the Giants into a long-term deal. Signing Saquon Barkley to a long-term contract would have been a win now kind of thing. That's, you know, locking in your star player because you think your team is going to win a whole bunch of games this year and for the next few years. But by not doing that, the Giants have the flexibility now. They have flexibility at their superstar running back position. The way that he constructed the Daniel Jones contract, you mentioned it earlier, Alex. They have flexibility to draft a new quarterback if they so choose. They have flexibility all over the place. That's always been my term that I've used to describe Joe Shane's offseason this year, and it's going to stay true going forward. So I'm still a believer in Joe Shane. I think that he's going to get the job done. I love the deadline deal that he made, and I am looking forward to seeing how he continues to construct this roster throughout the rest of the regular season. If there's any call-ups from the practice squad, waiver wire moves, whatever, I'm always interested to see what Joe Shane's doing because I really do believe in his vision, and I'd like to see him play it out and keep building here for the New York Giants. But how are you feeling about some of the things that I said there, Alex? Because I kind of said a whole lot, but I am still kind of proclaiming my confidence in Joe Shane, in some ways also in Brian Dable. But I'd like to know what you think about Joe Shane kind of being a shield, a protector here for Brian Dable. I know I've seen a lot more fans recently coming after Brian Dable, calling for his job. Again, I think it's way too premature, but I just want to know your kind of take on it in the sense that Joe Shane, coming from Buffalo, is the general manager. The general manager is the boss of the head coach. Do you also feel like Brian Dable is probably protected by season's end because Joe Shane is still going to be the general manager?
Yes. I'm not in the boat of firing Brian Dable. We have to end this 2-year cycle, as you mentioned, of firing your head coaches. This is not a sustainable way to build a team. Look, I think the players respect Brian Dable. I think that if the Giants go in the direction of getting a new quarterback, there's not many guys I'd rather have than Brian Dable leading the charge and helping develop a young passer. I think that Daniel Jones had one of his best seasons last year under the leadership of Brian Dable. The truth is that this offense has suffered catastrophic losses, right? Catastrophic. You're looking at Andrew Thomas, arguably the most important player on this team, going down in week 1. JMS going down in week 4 against Seattle. Evan Neal has just not been good. Saquon Barkley went down for a couple weeks. Daniel Jones missed time. Darren Waller's been in and out of the injury report, and obviously, we haven't been able to get him the ball properly. This offense was dismantled by week 1. You know what I mean? And the blowout loss to the Cowboys was the freaking catalyst behind losing this season. Like week 1, the season was gone after that loss. Why? Because we suffered a major injury to our most important offensive player in Andrew Thomas. The second we lost him, it was a wrap. And that's the truth. It was a wrap. Good teams don't really suffer injuries like that and actually walk away unscathed, right? Like good teams, their best players get injured. And you see what happened to Brock Purdy when he didn't have protection or his guys weren't available in Deebo Samuel. It's very rare that teams are able to supplement the loss of their star left tackles or their star quarterbacks or their star running backs, or their star receivers. Unfortunately for the Giants, it's a year-old tradition that we lose our best players for at least a couple games. You know what I mean? At least a few games. Andrew Thomas has dealt with injury and played through it in every single season he's been in the NFL, and he's still managed to put together elite numbers and elite grades, which indicates to me, if this guy can get freaking healthy and stay healthy, he's going to be the best left tackle in football. The problem is he's injured right now, and hopefully he comes back this week, but the offense went with him. And look, Brian Dable is just trying to manage a situation that's impossible to manage. The defense, guys, let's not ignore. We can look at the offense and say to ourselves, look, the offense is awful, but let's not ignore the fact that the defense has looked like one of the best units in football the last 3 weeks. Straight up, objectively true. If you don't agree with that, you're not watching the same games I am, because they have been lights out, phenomenal. You can't just disregard Brian Dable for that, can you? You can't look at the offense and say, oh, the offense is bad, then look at the defense and say, oh, he doesn't deserve any credit there. That's ridiculous. He absolutely deserves credit there. If Graham Gano could hit a freaking kick, we would have won last weekend and we would have had a little bit better attitude, wouldn't we? But Graham Gano missed 2 kicks. Once he usually makes, guys. Brian Dable can't go out there and kick field goals for Graham Gano. Brian Dable can't go over there and supplement the loss of Andrew Thomas. Like we're talking about like situations that he has no control over. We have an offensive line pieced together by practice squad players at times. What can Brian Dable do? There's nothing. I mean, look, the coaching, the reality is like when it comes down to like a timeout or like a split-second decision is the difference between winning and losing games. Sometimes you're going to be on the losing end of those. And when your team is not good and the players are missing kicks and the players are not performing well, every decision you make ends up being a bad one. If Graham Gano hits that kick, we're not even questioning Brian Dable in that situation. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the reality. Tyrod Taylor not being able to score on the 1 yard line against the Buffalo Bills twice. I mean, Brian Dable, they just got stopped, man. Like, what can you do? They just didn't complete the pass. They didn't execute properly. What can Dable do? You know what I mean? I do not think it's time to fire Brian Dable. I do not think I'm ready to move on from him whatsoever. I actually still have faith in Joe Schoen and Brian Dable completely because this team has been shredded to pieces. You know what I mean? We need to see this team as a full, healthy unit before we make any drastic measures, drastic reactionary moves like that. And the truth is, we just can't. We have to wait until then. And unfortunately, like that sucks because it could take a while. And we'll see what happens next year. But, of course, that MetLife turf, I mean, like how many injuries did we see against the Jets? They had a torn ACL, a couple of really bad injuries, and, Giants lost Darren Waller with a hamstring issue. Like, it's just never ending with this team. It never ends. Like, we can blame Brian Dable all we want, but he's not purposely going out there and shooting his players in the feet. So, it's just injuries. You can't predict them. It's tough, but it's the same story every single season. The Giants got to figure that out. I don't know if it's going to natural grass. I don't know if it's, replacing their, medical staff. I don't know what's going on, but it's the same story every single season. We lose our best players. Every year we lose our best freaking players. I don't really get it because other teams lose like their third string receivers, but we lose our star left tackle, our quarterback, running back, star receivers, pass catchers, tight ends. We lose everybody. It freaking pisses me off. I don't really understand how this happens. We have the worst injury luck, and it just freaking confuses me.
It confuses me too. There's endless things that I can mention that confuse me about the New York Giants, especially over the last decade of football. Man, things used to be so simple back in the day. It was like the New York Giants had Eli Manning, and you knew that he could put up points in the fourth quarter, and they had a pass rush that could win you games, and that was it. And now here we are, and every year we have expectations, and every year our expectations seemingly fail to be met, except for last season. They exceeded expectations. So then we set new expectations, and they failed to meet them. So I don't really know what to say. It's been a tough go about as a New York Giants fan for years and years. But like you just said, like I just said, I'm standing by Brian Dable. I'm standing by Joe Schoen through the end of the season and hoping that Brian Dable shows some more signs of improvement, signs of life here throughout the rest of the year. But when we get into the offseason, I'm going to stick with my claim that Joe Schoen is a great GM and he's doing a great job. And he and Brian Dable deserve to at least see their vision sought out for the next couple of seasons, I think, or at least another year. They deserve to continue building this team because roster construction doesn't happen overnight, guys. It takes years and years to build a contender. And like I said, I think that Joe Schoen is doing it the right way. It's just about getting the right pieces in place in the coaching staff and hitting on those draft picks. That second round pick doesn't mean shit if the Giants draft a bust. So it's very important for Joe Schoen and his scouting staff to find the right talent and acquire the right players to help build this team into a contender because that's all that we want to see. And of course, as the New York Giants continue to build this team, continue to play these games and everything else, we will continue to update you on everything surrounding this team right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode and comment your thoughts on the topic down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. But without further ado, we will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one and let's go Giants.